Welcome to the Independent Artist Podcast, sponsored by the National Association of Independent Artists.
Also sponsored by Zapplication. I'm Will Armstrong, and I'm a mixed media artist.
I'm Douglas Sigworth, a glassblower. Join us as we explore the topics that affect the lives and livelihoods of art show artists. Welcome back to the podcast, everyone. It's September. And this is the month, Will, we've all been talking about.
I am so busy. I feel like I should just be running around in circles in the yard. That's how I feel. That's how many things I have to do. I just feel like sprinting and then run working. I'm a little panicked getting ready to go into this month.
This is nuts. I mean, we knew it was coming.
Yep.
And we got a lot of build up for it. And now it's time to do it.
Oh, yeah.
I feel like I need to pull out my old Tony Robbins cassette tapes from the 1980s. Did you ever listen to him, the motivational speaker guy?
I know who he is, but I never listened to him, no.
I couldn't escape it at my house. My dad was a district manager, and it was his job to motivate teams of corporate salespeople.
Okay.
And he went through their whole training seminar, did the walking through coals, standing on flagpoles. And so whenever I had to go and apply for jobs or for my grad school auditions and whatnot, he would put on the Rocky theme, the Eye of the Tiger, and he'd get me all pumped up and motivated. So I think we need to do a little Eye of the Tiger here going towards us.
I wish we could have that in the background. We can't afford the Rocky theme, Douglas. We can't have the bump music. But man, I feel you, but I'm already motivated. I don't know how much more motivated I can be. If I have much more, I'm going to have a heart attack. So let's just
you need
do
to calm
this.
Things down.
Yeah, exactly. I need music. I don't need the Rocky thing.
All right, sounds good. Are you finishing up some work here this week, getting ready to head out on the road?
Yeah, I've got one on the easel right now, and I am tempted. If I finish this one, I may try to finish another one too. There's a piece that I don't know if you can't do this with glass. You can't have a piece that's, you finish a piece and you're like, well, why didn't I do this? Like I can go back and noodle around. I don't know. I've got a piece that I really like the design of it, but there's a little questionable area that I'm thinking about going in and redrawing. Yeah,
with glass, it's like it's done. You do it, it's in the oven. You can't go back and do a damn thing to it. So there's like this moment of acceptance and moving on. And sometimes you put the piece away and you think, I just made a masterpiece. And then you open the oven the next day and you're like, not so much.
See, with me, I've talked about this a bunch, but I leave it on the easel and I'm like, oh, wow, well, I just did something terrible and I feel terrible about myself and I need to go eat lunch. And then you come back and you're like, oh, well, maybe that's not so bad. Okay, maybe there's not quite so much self-loathing.
There you go. Well, there was no glass making for us this week. It was all about studio repair.
Oh, yeah, that's right. I was watching social media and seeing that whole thing kind of unfold. Pretty fascinating.
To be a glass blower, you need equipment and infrastructure. And every couple of years, we need to do kind of a full studio maintenance type deal. So before we left for Park City, our glass blowing crucible, the glass ate through the crucible, which means that glass was leaking into the bottom of the furnace, which had to be dealt with. So we shut her off, and when we got back here after the last two shows, it's been a solid week and a half of just tearing it all apart, putting up temporary I-beams and setting up engine hoists and taking the whole furnace apart, hoisting it out and putting in new parts.
What I was going to ask, because I saw that again on social and I saw that hoist. It looked like my buddy who's a mechanic, the hoist, it looks like something heavy duty enough to haul an engine out.
It is. It is an engine hoist.
Ooh, that's crazy.
We're lifting weights between, the new pots are around 500 pounds. But once they've got glass embedded into them or any of the castings at the top of the furnace, we could be up to 1,000 pounds to 1,200 pounds.
So, oh, my God. That's crazy. I feel your pain because I was working on a really large painting and I had the panel up on my easel. I work standing and I had it up on the easel and then it started to slip and slide down. And I was like, man, the clamps on my easel are starting to give. So I had to use a little clamp and I put it on there.
Yeah, you feel my pain, all right. I was actually with you 100% waiting to hear about how this was going to be a big, heavy ordeal, and that's where it goes, I tell you.
You know those clamps that you use when you roll your tent sides? I had to walk like right over there and grab one, and then I had to, and it was really, it was kind of a rusty one, so I could have gotten a cut.
I'm extra careful because the first time we ever attempted to do this repair with this furnace, which was like 15 years ago, I was not using the right equipment. I didn't have the right weight. I didn't have any I-beams up. And I almost brought the entire studio ceiling down on my wife.
Come on.
Yeah, it was, I was there too, but she was in the crux of it. She was deep into it and she would have been injured bad. And so both of us are just like, okay, we escaped that one and we're going to like learn from this and make sure we do it right from here on out.
That's crazy. Well, you're ready to roll when you get back into your studio, and have you made any work with it or no?
Nope, it's still on its way up and I'm filling up the tank. And there's still some tweaks I'm having to figure out that aren't working exactly right, but I'm not going to bore people with that. So hopefully when we get back from Pearl and we'll be back on the road doing these shows, we'll at least be able to get a couple days in the studio between shows.
Cool.
Each week. Yeah.
Good. Yeah, you're centrally located. So Pearl back to Minnesota, then down to what? What else are you headed to?
Yeah, after Pearl, it's some Midwest stuff. We've got Kansas City, we've got Madison, we've got Belleville, Illinois. So yeah, some a day's worth drive.
Right. Yeah. Good. It's exciting times, folks. Good luck out there on the road, and listen to your gut on your engines and your vehicles. Long may you run. Let's get out there and sell some art.
And make lots and lots of money out there, everyone, and be safe. Be safe.
Speaking about being safe, I'm headed to Denver on Wednesday, driving down, couple day drive from Minnesota where I am. And they're putting some safety measures in place there. And when this podcast comes out, it'll be the Monday of that show, Labor Day or Monday or Tuesday, whatever this one comes out. But we will already know how it has gone. I always have anxiety going to a new show. Where am I going to park? Where am I going to do this? How's this going to work? And so Cherry Creek's a new one this year. We've got a new location, and I trust those folks. And
absolutely.
Absolutely. I mean, it's a tightly run ship, but it's a new location, new weekend, and they're making people register for timed entry, which, I always worry about. It's like, I worry about money, and we have these little sayings about money. It's like money don't sweat. It's 100 degrees and your clients don't show up. It's because money doesn't sweat, and money doesn't necessarily get wet either. They don't want to come out in the pouring rain sometimes. And we have all these little things. I mean, I wonder, it's like money don't wait. Like, are they going to line up at the front and we're like, can you come back in an hour and a half? And are people going to really be understanding? Be like, no, I'm right here,
Yeah. Well, I'm hoping that with all of the marketing and what goes into it, that people will know ahead of time that they have to plan their entry time and look into it.
Yeah. All the artists' announcements on social have, hey, don't forget to register, all that stuff. But boy, would I rather that people could just walk in and walk out. So I actually have a little outside booth, outside perimeter. So if I have to cut a hole in the fence.
Come in right here.
Right. The Will Armstrong Art Show. I'll just have an entrance on front and back. Whatever it takes.
That's interesting. Pearl is also fencing. I just was reading about that. But what I don't know is if they're doing the same kind of timed flow or if it's for other reasons. I'm not sure what our fencing issue is going to be. But yeah, that whole slowing down the crowd it's a scary thought for us artists, for sure, because we need the masses.
Yeah, it's scary and it's infuriating too. It is stoking that fire of rage that I have burning against the unvaccinated and the folks that are being selfish about, or the folks that are being miseducated. How about that? How about we be a little more politically correct on that? But instead of calling them morons, they're the miseducated.
Miseducated. Well, they are taking the horse tranquilizers, or what is that stuff? The dewormer? What do they take?
Is that really a thing? I mean, is that just...
Ivermectin?
Yeah, that's right. Well, we were worried about, you're making this out of baby fetuses. God, it makes me insane.
It does. We don't need to belabor that point. We beat that horse to the ground. So we can move on to the next point, which is some really exciting news, is that our good friend of the podcast, Cindy Lyric, has a new position.
That's right. She's going to be the director of Fort Myers down in Florida. She picked herself a nice little plum vacation spot to live. So that's pretty exciting.
I'm really excited for her. She's going to be making the rounds to some of these shows too. So look out for the Cindy Lyric visit we talked about in our episode where we talked how Cindy likes to come and network and talk to artists. So you may just see her in Cherry Creek this weekend or in St. Louis here in a couple weeks.
Right. I'm excited to talk to her. I wish selfishly, I wish she'd gone somewhere that was not Florida, because I'm thinking about giving up the state of Florida altogether.
Oh, is it all about you, Will? I'm just kidding.
Yeah, it is. You haven't learned that yet? It absolutely is. That is an irrelevant show to my schedule, Cindy. No, I'm excited for her, but it does have me rethinking my mental decision to kind of go with the Daryl Thetford method and cut out the shows that are hard for me. I'd be tempted. It's going to have a lot of people reapplying to that show. I'm excited for the show, and I'm excited for our industry in general, just that she's more on the scene.
Well, I admit it's different for you. You're not going to Florida from Virginia anymore. You're going to Florida from New Mexico, which is a bit more of a hike.
Well, I'm excited about New Mexico and trying out some of these local things and seeing what I can do without putting the mileage on my truck and my vertebrae sitting on my butt, listening to audiobooks.
Yeah, so there you go.
Yeah,
awesome. Well, I think it's that time. We are ready to listen to your really great interview with Deb Adelson.
I've been wanting to sit down with Deb for a while now. You and I have not tackled a jeweler just yet.
You're a little closer to the jeweler networks than I am, so you've been hearing that there's some rumblings.
There's some rumblings in my bedroom at home. She's like, when are you going to talk to a jeweler?
There you go. What's wrong with us?
Right? I'm like, well, if you'd agree to come on the podcast, we could do it right now.
There you go.
So it was funny. A lot of the questions that I asked Deb were just directly siphoned. She's like, get her to talk about this, get her to talk about that.
But it's good. We need to know. All of us, part of this podcast is learning from each other and learning what different artists go through and really knowing what different inherent challenges with other mediums are involved. And so it was really great to hear all of that.
So many people think that the jewelers can just pack their stuff up in a suitcase and then roll in and roll out, but it comes with all these anxieties. I mean, I remember I've been a jeweler's assistant because, my wife, Susan Elnora Jewelry, I've gone to many of the big shows and helped her do it. But it's like, you're walking around, you got a backpack on your back full of gold and diamonds.
That's
and you're
right.
like, I'm going into downtown New Orleans to have a couple of drinks and some great food. And I mean, I was walking down Frenchman Street and this guy's like, what you got, a big old bag of money? In my head, I'm like, yeah, I do. I've got a giant bag of money just on my back. So it's stressful. And I appreciate her kind of giving us that inside information on what it takes to have that side of the life.
One thing I have in common with the jewelers is we, as glass folks, have to pack up all our stuff at the end of the show. We can't just drop the tent and go. So I'm always one of the last folks out. Well, it was one of these shows where I had to walk several blocks in the dark. It was one of those preview nights. And I'm walking towards the artist parking. There's nobody around. I'm feeling kind of vulnerable myself, but I'm not walking with an entire house worth of materials in my backpack. And I come across my friend Jay Nielsen, and he looks pretty shaken. And he's like, Doug, do you know where artist parking is? And I said, yeah, walk with me. I could see this was a serious issue. That was so important to him that he had somebody to buddy up with him to get him to where he needed to be with having all of his inventory in his backpack. Basically, anytime I see him, he picks me up a Starbucks Americano, which he knows I like.
That's awesome. I mean, it is scary. It's scary to be out there. And, thinking about just going to an art show and standing on the corner of Ontario and LaSalle in downtown Chicago. I was doing an AMDR show way back when. And I'm standing there and I had this guy count out $6,000 in 20s and 50s and 100s on the corner of Ontario and LaSalle. And it's like, cars are going by and there's a guy I just saw him steal all of the papers out of the paper box. And he's standing on the corner selling the papers next to me as he's counting out this money. I'm like, thank you for just making me the most robbable man in Chicago, you know? And then all of a sudden, I'm like, but that's what jewelers deal with every day. You know, they are the most robbable person in whatever city they're rolling through. So the anxiety that comes with that line of work is intense. And I've been there when my wife is breaking down a show at the end of every single freaking day. And it's like what I love about doing some of these 4 or even longer day shows. And I know I'm a misnomer in the artist world. I like the longer ones. I like setting up shop and just zipping up at the end of the day. I like those longer ones. But not when I'm helping her do jewelry and you have to break it down every night. It's like, I just want to go get food. I don't want to put your little thing in a little baggie and put it in the thing and then make sure it's in the place. It's annoying. Anyway, she's going to be like, I didn't know you felt that way.
I think she could probably pick up on your mood at that point.
Are you saying I wear it on my sleeve, Doug? Is that what you're saying?
A little bit.
A little easy to read.
Let's get on to Deb here, shall we?
Shall we? All right. Debra Adelson is a good friend, and I'm excited for y'all to hear the talk. Thank you so much. She's a jeweler coming out of New Jersey, which you'll be able to hear in her voice, and proud to have her as our first jewelry guest.
Awesome. All right, here is Deb Adelson. This episode of the Independent Artist Podcast is brought to you by Zap, the digital application service where artists and art festivals connect.
You know, Doug, I was sitting down and talking with my wife yesterday. She had just come in from her studio and she was complaining. One of the big shows, they decided to do a do-it-yourself, reinvent the wheel application.
Hate that so much.
Yeah, seriously. I mean, it's like typically an application that would take you 2 minutes on Zap. All of a sudden, it's going to take you an hour and a half to reformat all of your images to their specifications. It just made me think about how easy applying with Zap is.
You just click a few buttons, you've got your 1920s all formatted, and you are good to go.
Exactly. So I personally appreciate what Zap is doing, and thanks for not making us reinvent the wheel every single week like we used to have to do. The Independent Artist Podcast is proud to welcome Debra Adelson to the show. She's inspired by the natural world and her relationship to it. A lot of her work pays homage to the changing forces that shape our landscape, both natural and man-made. There's a certain kind of harmony that you'll find in her work, and I'm proud for you to be able to hear her talk all about it, as well as her experience as a jewelry artist. There you are. How's it going?
How are you?
I'm great. Welcome to the podcast. I don't know if you've heard any of these things.
I've listened to a few. Yeah, I think they're really cool. I'm glad you're doing this.
Yeah, I needed to talk to a jeweler before I got run out of town. I mean, jewelry is what, like 60% of a lot of shows, even more?
Yeah, we dominate the shows. There's so many of us. We're a dime a dozen.
Well, I mean, that's what makes it hard to get into shows, too.
It does. Everybody's a jeweler, and anybody could stick a pin back on anything and then be a jeweler. So it's frustrating.
It is frustrating. You aren't a dime a dozen. You're just, I feel like you guys are more competitive to get into shows than any other category because there are so many. So like you said, like anybody that can string a bead together thinks they're a jeweler.
You know, I went to school for jewelry. So I've been doing it my whole career. Even when I wasn't doing shows with jewelry, you know, I'm kind of a jewelry snob. When I look at some of the stuff that's in the shows or gets juried into the shows, it's frustrating. And I kind of think that, like, you know, jewelry is one of the categories that there should always be one juror who understands the craft of jewelry on every jury. And there aren't.
No, there aren't.
As opposed to looking at jewelry as a commodity or a saleable object. I feel like a lot of times we're judged more about saleability by juries than judging us as an art form.
So do you think that happens with other mediums, really? Like the saleability of things?
I think wearables also might fall into that category. I think subconsciously, when the jurors look at things, they think, oh, I would wear that, or I wouldn't wear that. When they look at paintings, I don't know, do they say like, oh, I would put that over my couch? Like, we're all taught not to judge 2D that way, but for some reason, it seems to be socially acceptable to judge jewelry and wearables that way. And they ask, a lot of the applications even ask you what your prices are. Why else would they be doing that if they weren't concerned about saleability?
Right. Yeah. I wonder about that too. Like the St. Louis jury always asks us, all right, well, if I have $250 to $5,000, they want to see my $250 one. I'll make sure that that one's represented. And sometimes I think that's like a little not fair, and it's got to be even worse for you guys.
Well, I look at what I do. Jewelry is the art form that I choose to make. I don't do production work. I just make what I want to make on any given day. That's how I chose to look at what I do. Some degree, I want my work to be saleable. I want to make money. I need to support myself.
Yeah, of course.
I look at it in terms of I'm making my artwork. It happens to be wearable, but it's frustrating to be judged alongside production work.
Yeah.
A lot of us jewelers went to art school. I went to Tyler School of Art, and the first several years before I could even pick my major, I had to take drawing, painting, graphic design, all of the other categories of art. So I am not saying that I'm a specialist in painting but I have taken painting classes. I have taken life drawing classes. These are all the things that went into my art education.
It's tough. So yeah, I agree with you. Put a jeweler on the jury. If you're going to have jewelry in the show, then I think you need to have one. But where are you working?
Where? In my basement, because it's very classy, very, very glamorous down here.
I feel like a lot of jewelers get shuffled off to the basement. Our friend Hillary Hashey works down in a cellar hole as well.
Yeah, I call it my dungeon. I had a really beautiful studio for a lot of years outside of my house. When I had my son, I just couldn't get anything done. So I kind of dominate the whole house. My jewelry studio is in the basement. I do photography. I do that in the attic. And then we redid the kitchen and I knocked down a wall. And so half of the kitchen is where I do my computer work. So I moved my stuff into the kitchen. So because when my son was little, and I needed to keep an eye on him.
Right.
I thought that I would be able to set up a little art station in my studio when he was a baby, when he was little, and he would keep himself occupied and I can get work done. But that's not how kids work.
No way. I find the same type of deal. I get a certain zone going, and if you can work, if I'm locked into a certain piece and everything's kind of working, then it takes me sometimes a couple of hours to get back onto that. And kids are not compatible with that. I'm like, oh, my line work is really working and whatever. And then somebody comes and I don't know, they don't do this anymore. But if somebody has a load in their pants, okay, I am out of the zone, changing a diaper. I'm doing this, I'm doing that. It's hard, man. I mean, I don't know. I love, right now where we are in Minnesota, I have a shed, it's almost a quarter mile from the house and it's back and I get no cell reception and, I can just sit there and lock in.
And my son is he's going to be 12. I think I'm so used to compartmentalizing, being around him all the time, especially over the last year and a half, not leaving the house and still trying to get work done, that I focus so much on what I'm doing that I really don't notice what's going on around me. I really, truly don't. I lock it out. So he could be on the video game screaming. Yeah. I don't even hear it. I flat out don't notice it. But it to the point where I'll put something in the oven, which I do all the time. I'm going to be I'm going to make dinner, but I'm also working in the studio. And then it's the house is full of smoke. And I'm oh, yes, I did it again. How I haven't burned my house down, I don't know, but I multitask very poorly because the main task is the thing. And that's usually what I'm making. And then I'm focused on that. And that's what's the main part of my very small brain. And I'm oh yeah, but feeding people to keep them alive, the intent to feed them is there. Yeah. And then
the actuality, it just kind of
falls apart.
I don't know that even multitasking, I'm not sure that even really exists, to be honest. I don't know that anybody that really can nail that. But yeah, I wanted to talk to you too about the jeweler's experience, because so many people think that oh, it's jewelry and you come in your tiny little car and you zip right in and you throw everything in a suitcase and then you zip right out. Or even or I helped Susan do Cherry Creek and it was all clogged in. So she rented a tent and she had her rented tables and risers and then came in with a suitcase and everybody's just fuck you. It's so easy for you, but they don't see the other side. I just kind of wanted to talk to you a little bit about kind of the jeweler's experience, the things that people don't see. But I just kind of wanted to hear your voice on it a little bit.
I get that too. I do fly around. Well, I did back pre-COVID. I flew around. I would show up with my suitcase, but there's so much thought and planning that goes into whittling the necessities down to that 2 suitcases and a carry-on that it took me years to evolve to that point of like making it all fit neatly into that suitcase and being able to do it efficiently so that I could get to the show and have everything I need. That's the first part. But our materials are much more expensive than other people's materials.
Right.
And on top of that, there's this theft issue that other mediums, they don't really have to think about that.
Well, yeah, all of your shit can fit into a suitcase. If it can fit into a suitcase for you to carry.
And there have been in recent years a bunch of big thefts to jewelers at shows. So it's becoming more of an issue. Even the show directors, we just got that email from St. Louis. I don't know if they sent it to everyone about having police escort us back to our hotels if we want. Which is so nice that some shows are acknowledging that, especially when they go to really late at night, walking through city streets alone with like a bag worth more than my home.
Right.
And I'm like 5 feet tall. So there's that aspect of things. Every medium has its positives and negatives.
It does.
It is frustrating when they give us all of that attitude, but then they zip off and be like, bye.
That's the thing.
I have to go an hour and a half before the show. It's like I'm a turtle. I have to carry everything to and from. I can't leave anything. I have to be super careful with every single thing and keep my eyes on every single customer.
Yeah.
It's stressful. My mom came with me to a show once and she was helping somebody and she handed a big expensive piece and they just walked off into the crowd. I'm like, Mom,
oh my God.
What? Did they pay? She was no. I was like, you're supposed
what the hell?
I didn't want to make my mom feel bad, but I was just like, but I still had a whole, how it gets at Cherry Creek with you're 10 deep and there's this huge crowd and somebody just literally they were like, oh, thanks. And they, walk away.
That's crazy.
And they disappeared into the crowd. There went $3,000.
Right. Exactly. And you can't really find
what are you going to do? And am I going to leave my booth?
So more of it can walk away?
Exactly. Like I said, there's positives and negatives to every medium. I envy the people who sit across the street on a chair and relax, whereas I'm on and I have to be on. I have to be engaged and I have to have my show persona and I can't really have a quiet off day where I don't feel like talking to somebody when I'm at a show because I will not sell anything and it'll all walk away.
Yeah, your sales are completely reliant on yourself. I mean, sometimes you can let your work speak for itself, but if you're not there to hand it to somebody or show it to them on it, it's a really personal thing. I'm 5 o'clock happens, say, one of these shows that goes till 10 o'clock at night or 9 o'clock at night. And, your friends, your colleagues in 2D across the way are out having happy hour and having a beer and a laugh. If you have one person in your booth, you're doing the little dance and you can't walk away.
I've had this happen many times. Yeah. I do feel as though when somebody comes into my booth, they're buying the experience of buying something from me. And so I try and be charming and engaging and give them the whole experience of buying a piece from me and build a relationship. I have people who collect my work who collect my work and they'll continue to keep buying. And so if I'm in a poopy pants mood and I don't feel like being charming, I could potentially be ruining something that could build for the future. So there's that.
Yeah. I've been there. I've seen people in Fort where there was some jeweler that I was down the way from. Whatever that woman's name is that owns Walmart or has a huge share in Walmart. She was coming down the way. And I went in to try to say something to her hey, you might want to, she was setting up. She was it's going to be a long day. I'm not in the right mood. And this woman comes into her booth as I was trying to say, hey, you might want to, and she's like, oh, can I see this piece? And she was like, I'll be open at 10 and hands her a card. And it's like, you just blew off the richest woman in America. And I didn't even want to tell her. I was like, yeah, okay, you just fucked up really bad. But that's the thing. If you're not in the mood, I've got a sandwich over here that's getting cold. It's impossible. Like even eating as a jeweler, you can't leave your booth. You can't go to the bathroom unless somebody's watching it. You've got to be there constantly. Yeah. Have you trained your body to just be completely dehydrated at all times when you're at a show?
All the time. I like being next to like a really cool couple. The non-artist member of the couple will offer to keep an eye on things every now and then. But I'm weird about asking people for help. I feel like I've been doing shows for so long. I guess I should be over it, but I like to be self-contained. I don't like to like bother people that are next to me. So unless it's like an emergency, I won't be like, oh my God, can you watch my booth? Unless they offer. Like in Ann Arbor, I had really nice people next to me, and they had on both sides of me, and they had offered, and it was yay! I can like drink water and go to the bathroom like a normal person.
That's the thing. If you are, if I have one piece of advice, if you are next to a jeweler and there are two of you, or even if there aren't, like I've got huge pieces. I've got like a booth, a full booth for me is like 9 paintings. That's it. So you've got like 900 pieces out, and it's like, hey, I can watch your booth and my booth for 10 minutes and just let you know. So, I mean, it's like, just step into your jeweler's booth, especially people that are there by themselves. It's a different experience, you know?
It is. I've never experienced the other side of things. You know, like I love to be next to other artists who are like gone the entire time. And I think like, wow, how's that? Like, how do they function?
Exactly. Anthony Hansen was my neighbor at a show one year, and he and I are buddies, and he's the best. And he and I were just hanging out, talking all weekend. Conversations with artists are so temporary. You don't have to say goodbye or hang on a second. You just are like, you just walk away.
Right. We all know.
In the middle of a sentence, you just kind of shake your head and walk in. And occasionally you'll get the artist that doesn't get it. I mean, you're trapped too. If somebody's sitting there running their mouth while looking at your work, you're like, oh my God. I
actually got an email from another jeweler a number of years ago. It wasn't actually that long ago. She said, I can't believe how rude you were to me. I was telling you something and you just ignored me. Yeah, I got this long email, and I was like, I don't remember it happening, but I'm sure somebody had come into the booth, and I gave the look of like, okay, now I'm turning over here without. Yeah, I must have thought I gave that look, like you know the look when you're like, all right, now I'm over here, and go like to the customer, like, hey, how are you? How can I help you? And she got so offended that I didn't listen to the rest of her blah blah.
What a moron.
I was like, and that she wrote me an email, and the email chain went back and forth for like the longest time. Like, I'm really sorry, but I'm at the show to sell my work.
Right. You are there an hour and a half before people even get there. If a show starts at 11, you've got to be there at 9:30 or maybe even earlier. Sometimes they're like, well, judging starts at 10 for a show that opens at 11. And then you're like, well, that means I have to get there at 8 o'clock.
Right.
So you're there at 8 o'clock. And if they're open until 10 o'clock, that means you're there till 11 packing it all away, because you're not leaving anything behind. Like my nicest piece, I can see you walking down the street with it. You're not stealing anything from me, which is actually, that did happen to not my biggest piece, but I did the same thing your mom did and handed somebody like, a $600 piece. And they were like, and I was dealing with another sale and I'd already handed the thing off the wall and they walked away. But with me, I'm like, I am going to find this person. And I just walked down the thing. I'm like, I know what they look like. And I know you can't hide it under your coat like you can with yours.
Yeah, well, at Cherry Creek one year, I had a girl who was talking to me and looking me in the eye and asking me questions. And the really annoying thing was that she had actually asked me how long it'd take me to make my work as she's stealing my work.
Come on.
But she was wearing a neon bikini. Like bikini. So,
right.
They had like the street captains at Cherry Creek. And I knew that I had just put earrings on the earring rack. It was obvious somebody had recently stolen it. And I knew it had to be that girl. Anyway, I described her in her neon bikini top. And of course, all the street captains are male, so they were able to find her. And they brought her to a room and they had laid out everything in her shopping bag. And she had stolen from like every jeweler at the show. There was like They came, the cops came back to me. They put it on like a conference table, this huge conference table, and they had all this stuff laid out. And they were like, can you identify your work? And do you know anybody else's work? Can you identify? There was like half the jewelers at the show laying on this table.
That's
like she
amazing.
made the rounds to everyone.
Yeah. You're like, oh, there's Janine, and there's Megan, and there's Hillary, and there's, like, that's crazy.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's like, have you seen the lady in the pink?
I'm from some of the stores there.
Right. She's not that bright if she's wearing a neon bikini top and trying to blend into the crowd.
Ended up, she got her kid. But she wrote me, like, they made her write me an apology letter, and it was, like, signed with hearts over the eyes. I was like, she must have been really young. I kind of felt bad, like, oh. But she was probably, like, 14 or something. I don't know, but there were hearts over the eyes. I think I still have that letter because it was really kind of funny.
That's kind of, that
was like,
put that on the wall with your awards.
An artifact from doing shows. Right.
Exactly. That's exactly what you need. So I don't know. Have you seen the girl in the neon bikini top? And the guy's like, well, I'm looking at her right now. I can't seem to stop staring.
You know what? I knew that it would find her because it was quite the outfit. It wasn't subtle.
Yeah, that's good. At least she wasn't hiding the work in her bikini. Ooh. So you've got that going for you. You're like, but that brings me to another thing, like the personal aspect of jewelry too. I don't have to touch you.
Yeah.
If I'm selling my
That's
work.
one of the COVID issues.
People are gross.
Oh my God. People are so gross. I was in Virginia Beach. I'm 5 feet tall and I was wearing flip-flops. So there was no extra height.
Sure.
And this giant woman, she was like a linebacker in a bikini. Huge lady. Very sweaty and maybe wearing like tanning oil. I don't know. And she was wanting me to put the necklace on her. And she leaned over and I was like, there's going to be touching in places that I cannot avoid. And I'm not weird about touching people, but there was like a sticky sensory factor to it. And I was just like, how do you do this politely? So I like kind of tried to hand her the necklace and she was like, kept leaning into me. Yeah.
Yeah, that's too much.
There's a lot of that.
I mean, I don't have to hang my work on anyone. I don't have to put anything in anyone's holes in order to sell my work. It's not, I don't have to do it.
I've also had people, this is so gross, when they put on a ring and then they can't get the ring off. And I've had people put their finger in their mouth to wet the ring or they lick it and then they pull it out and then hand it to me with goobers on it. And I'm just like, like I've had that happen multiple times where somebody lifts. And I think you're looking at my studio right now.
Yeah.
I would not lick. Even my water is in a bottle with a lid. Like I wouldn't lick anything that I have touched in this studio if you paid me.
No way.
Ew. And not to mention how many people have touched that and you just stuck it in your mouth and then you put it on my hand. Yeah. Ew.
Here it is. Just have it back.
And it happens all the time.
Oh my God. Here, a little tuna salad for lunch. That's disgusting. Yeah.
People are so gross. I went and visited a friend in New York and, we were discussing like masks, no masks, all that stuff. And I was like, you know what? I used to live in New York and I probably would still be living there if I was allowed to wear a mask on the subway back then. Like people are so gross. Like I'm pro mask for so many reasons, not just for COVID, but because people are so gross.
Yeah. Definitely. People are nasty. And then, I don't know. I like the fact too. Yeah, I will always wear a mask on the plane from now on. Like, I'm such a germaphobe. Yeah. And then my wife will just she'll hear somebody coughing on the plane and she'll be like, oh my God, he's getting ready to be like climbing the walls because I just can't. I'm like, oh my God, why would you walk on the plane when you're sick? And like, this is all
I'm not a germaphobe. I'm a gross people-phobe. Like, I'm not afraid of getting sick. I mean, I've been sick.
Sure.
I just don't want your grossness on me.
Yeah. Hey, let's rewind and talk real quick about how you got started and how'd you get into this? Well,
I went to art school and I thought I was going to be a photographer. When I was in high school, my dad's uncle, my great uncle, passed away and he was an amateur photographer. And so nobody wanted his cameras. And so they kind of landed on me and I loved it, thought I was going to be a photographer. So I had photo scholarships. My entire portfolio was really photography going into art school. At Tyler, which is not the way it is anymore because they've moved into a new building, photo and jewelry were across the hall in the same building. And so you have to take a couple courses outside of your major. I'll make some rings for myself. That would be fun. And, and then I fell in love with it. There's a lot of tools and it's 3-dimensional. There's a lot of things that just click when I sat in the jeweler studio for the first time. Nice. It just felt right. My grandfather on my mother's side was a machinist, and I spent a lot of time as a kid with him. And so it kind of I didn't even know jewelry was an option as a career. I had no idea that people made jewelry for a living. I know that sounds stupid, but I didn't realize that was, even a thing until I was in college. And then I switched from photography to jewelry, and it kind of I never stopped. I just always loved, I make something from nothing and it functions. It does something. I thought I was going to go on and get a master's degree in industrial design. Okay. And so everything I had made as an undergrad was more in the silversmithing realm than the jewelry realm. So even the things that I made that were objects to be worn they were actually objects that you wore. Okay. All of the work that I did in undergrad was about objects that had multiple functions. So a teacup that had a tea infuser that rested in the handle, or baby spoons that were also rattles, and things that had multifunctions. So that kind of snowballed into what I originally started doing shows doing tableware and Judaic. And I did that. I did shows with that body of work for, maybe 10 years.
Did your school actually acknowledge art shows? Did they actually? Okay. Because, you said doing shows while you're in school.
It's very academic, which is why I thought I was going to go on to grad school. But at Tyler, they're really weird about, they wanted their quote unquote top students to stay there for graduate school. And they were kind of jerky about giving you recommendations to go on to some other school. And I had decided I wanted to go to RIT for grad school because they had an industrial design and jewelry. And I was accepted into both programs at RIT. And Stanley, the head of the jewelry department at Tyler, would not write me a recommendation because they wanted me to stay at Tyler for grad school. So it wasn't like I didn't earn the recommendation. I actually had won an award at graduation as the jewelry student. But he was just no, we want you to stay here. And I was all right, well, then I'll take a year off. And I moved to New York and I started working in the jewelry industry because I was I'm not going to incur all that debt on my life to stay to school that I already learned what there is to learn here. And Tyler was just a jewelry program. And I, at that point, thought I wanted to go do industrial design. So it was I don't even want to do what you're doing.
Interesting. You have these teachers at college. So you go away to school. And it's a lot of the teachers that are there primarily are there because they are not maybe selling their work. They've chosen the academic route. And so they're teaching art. So when it comes to actually selling, they don't have any experience, or they have super limited experience because they haven't been out there trying to sell it.
Yeah, totally hate that.
We are art world middle class is how I look at art shows. We actually are selling, so we're not the lower rung. We're middle class because we're selling it, but we're actually out there just hacking it out, just making things and trying to do it, as opposed to the gallery world who have the huge price tags on the pieces so that they can get a living and make the galleries keep the wheels on those wagons. So a lot of those teachers are not looking at us and thinking we should go out and sell it. So, how'd you break into doing art shows, or how did it come to you?
I'm going to back up for a second. And I just have a funny story to tell that they were so anti doing shows at Tyler that there was an alumni, somebody who had graduated from Tyler.
A graduate,
a graduate who had an MFA from Tyler, who's a very, very well-known artist who has no idea that I was a student when this happened. Yeah. Came back to give a visiting artist talk about life in the world, the jewelry world. And the faculty made him feel so bad and berated him so much in front of the students for doing art shows that he cried during the talk because they made him feel so bad. And I was there. I was a student when this happened. And I remember being like, note to self, never going back to Tyler to give an alumni speech ever, ever,
Seriously.
ever. And, like I would never go back, number one. But number two is that this person is somebody that we all as students really respected. And now even as a professional, really respect this person, their work, their career.
Isn't there an element of you, though, that would love to just go back, be like, no, fully loaded, like, yeah, come at me, they just be like...
there's an element of like delusion to some of the academic people who also do shows price-wise, or I don't know, there's a definite difference between, and I know this from like a couple glass artists who also teach and do shows, and jewelers too, about their status in the world. There's a little bit of a superiority. Do you have an MFA? Oh, you don't have an MFA. Like I never went back for my MFA. And maybe I'm internalizing, and I could be. I feel like, at this point, there's no need to go back to get an MFA. I feel like, what would it suit me? Like I really don't want to teach. I have no interest in teaching. I like to do other things, teaching not one of them.
Well, I mean, your skill level right now, you're able to create everything that you want to create, aren't you? I mean, I could see going back and taking a workshop if there was a skill or something that you felt like you wanted
I love to take workshops. Right. Yeah. I love to take workshops. I love to learn new things. But at this point in my career, I feel like earning an MFA is really for teaching purposes, because by the time you're in the master's program, the skills are not what you're learning. You're learning, I don't know what you're learning, but you're not learning the skills you should already have when you're going in there. And I feel for me, I learned more skills working for somebody else in the jewelry industry than I learned in school. I mean, I learned how to solder in school. I learned how to do like basic filing, cutting, all that stuff. But I remember like everybody's senior thesis stuff, like everything was held together by the glue and tape. Like it didn't function. It wasn't like really like you couldn't sell those pieces because they looked really good in a slide, but they didn't really function. I moved to New York after graduation, and I worked in some galleries and I worked in some artist studios in the jewelry industry. You can't sell them something that's not going to function. If it's going to like fall apart the minute they touch it, like never going to hear the end of it. So,
no
I learned how to really make things skillfully working for other people. The art part, the design part, the critical thinking, I feel like I learned that in college. I feel like the self-critique, the being able to edit the design aspect of my work, I feel like developed in school, but the actual skills to get the job done were developed after school.
Right. And then I feel like a lot of those things, like I had a bunch of different jobs that led me to it, but it's like even the craft of painting or illustration is learned. Like, and again, I totally believe in going to school, but like you talk about self-critique, and it's like, you do have to do that. But it's like, I think that is where I developed a healthy sense of self-loathing in my own work, just like, oh God, why did I make this? I hate this. I hate myself for making it. I mean, that's completely opposite, I know, of talking to William Kwamina Poe. Like he was talking about how much he loved his work and early on, and then he'll look back on it and be like, oh, well, I maybe wasn't so skilled at that aspect of my career, but he loved it then. I'm like, oh no, I hated it.
I don't ever look, and it's so funny. I don't ever look at anything I make with like admiration and love. Even like finished big pieces, it's like something that gets me to the next place. Like I feel like my work, and I look at everything that I make as like part of the evolution. Yeah. It's all just another step to the next, to the next, to the next thought, to the next thought, to the next thought. So sometimes I'm like, oh, that's cool. I think that's as like positive as I ever get. Like, oh, that doesn't suck. Like,
yeah. I don't totally hate myself for that.
Also, I admire the people who are like, I made this. I love it. And you should totally buy it because isn't it amazing? And those are words that will never come out of my mouth. I could say to a customer like, oh, that looks really great with your skin tone. I don't know. Like sometimes I'll like want to say something more salesy, but I can't.
Yeah. it's so much easier to sell other people's work. Like if I step into my wife's booth and I'm a fan of it, so I'm like, yeah, this is awesome. Isn't this cool? Oh, look at this, because this is, I can tell people what I'm thinking, but I do have a hard time with like, oh yeah, isn't it wonderful? Look how great I am. I don't know. I have a hard time with.
You can look at my work in terms of like an aspect of the piece that was successful, and then take that aspect to move forward to the next piece. But like, every now and then I'll like look back at old work and I'll be like, that piece wasn't so bad. Or like, I make a lot of work. I keep on moving. And so sometimes I don't even remember a piece that I've made. I'll unearth it in my show bag. I have pieces that I like more than others, and those are the pieces that go out. And so sometimes something that I made kind of gets buried and I forget about it. And then I unearth it. I'm like, oh, that's not so bad. Like, why did I hate this piece so much? And I look at it with different eyes. Yeah, right. No, I never. I'm like, I love what I made.
It's kind of refreshing to hear that. How long do you give a piece to sell before you put it back in the bag and it doesn't get that front row seat in your booth anymore?
For me, pretty quickly. Yeah. I work a lot. For me, my studio is my escape from everything. I like to be in my studio and I kind of don't like to be other places. My studio is the place I feel most comfortable. It's the place that I'm most me. And so, I like to be down here, and, through all the trials and tribulations of life, I can go into my studio and like kind of shut those things off, like parents or relationships or whatever, frustrations of being a parent. I go into my studio and I can kind of shut it out and I focus on whatever it is, the problem that I'm solving in my own work. It's like my escape. So even when I'm sitting and smiling, doing my son's summer reading with him, I'm thinking of designing other pieces. So my work evolves. It evolves. I like to make new work. I like to think of a new design challenge for myself. It, might not be obvious to others, and I don't even know that matters, is that it like keeps all the other things that are going on in my head at bay. Like I function. Like that's one thing that was really hard for me during the pandemic was I did take a lot of time out of the studio, partially because my materials are really expensive. And I was like, I can't keep spending money and not have shows to sell it at. So I'm going to have to take a break. But I mean, there was like an aspect of me that was kind of unpleasant to be around because I had all this crazy energy and thoughts that I couldn't like harness into sitting down on my bench and like putting my thoughts into something else.
Right. That's a really interesting part of it too. Do you change the prices of your work based on the price of metal? Like, do you rework it every time, or do you work it like, okay, this piece cost $800 back then, and even though silver is spiked all the way up to here, or gold is spiked all the way to here, then do you rework it, or do you tell people that it's like, hey, you're getting a good deal because now the price of gold is through the roof?
I generally make my prices for when I bought the material and not for the price the material is now. So in Ann Arbor, and I did sell a lot of like gold rings because, hey, I bought this pre-pandemic. When I restock, prices are going to be completely different. Get it all front. Some people recognize that.
Yeah, you can tell somebody like, look, can I get a deal on this? And you're like, absolutely not, because I made this 6 months ago when gold was at this and now it's here. And to remake it, you're actually getting a better deal.
The thing about my work in particular, for me, the price is mostly in the time and skill. But a lot of especially with the glass work, like the glass that I use is not cheap to begin with. And then there's hours and hours and hours in it. So sometimes people are like, well, why is that piece this price? And this one has gold in it and it's that price. And it's like, well, this one took me like 3 weeks to just make the piece of glass. And that one I did in an afternoon. And although like the materials are more expensive, there is a perceived value. I do have like, it's something I struggle with my work pricing, because the glass is so labor intensive and the technique that I use is slow. It's really, really slow. And there's no way to rush it without like fully destroying the piece. If we rush it, it cracks. And that's that. It's done.
And you're done.
So, you have to take it as slow as it takes. And it just takes a really long time. It's a really intentional, slow process. And so the prices on that, it's hard for me, even though it's just glass, as lots of customers will say. Why is it so expensive? It's just glass. It's weeks and weeks and weeks of work and years of figuring out a technique. So buy it or don't buy it, that's fine. And most people who buy my work get it.
Yeah. I mean, you're a jeweler and you're essentially making your own gems.
Exactly. And I do a lot of my own lapidary work, but honestly, even the lapidary. Even when I cut a stone, that's relatively fast because I'm cutting and polishing a stone and I can do that kind of in my sleep. Whereas the glass work, it takes like planning and thought. Like I have to know where I'm going with it way ahead of time. It's like carving a stone sculpture. So, I take away too much here and then it doesn't work. I have to be very intentional with what I'm doing because of the weight of the glass. Everything has to be very intentional. And I also do what's called cold connections because I can't solder the glass to the metal. Like I'm working with two dissimilar materials. And so there has to be a lot of thought with the mechanics of how the piece is held together beforehand. So, there's a lot of like planning that goes into making something look like it just happened. So there's time in it. So, that these are the things that I think about when I'm pricing my work. And I know I hate that I do this, but I tend to underprice my work because like I get like, oh, I don't want them to think I'm crazy, and I want to sell it and move on.
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, you don't want to keep a piece forever, but I mean, I can see that. Right. You run into the same thing, I think, probably that my wife does, where it's like you are creating a lot of people's signature pieces. The piece that they're wearing of yours becomes part of them. And again, it's like I might be creating somebody's living space, but you're creating it's on them. It's a much more personal connection that you have to create with somebody, and they have to. The effortlessness that comes off in your work and the technicality, but then you've got to also have that personal connection. It's a tough business. I admire it, but I wouldn't want a piece of it.
I don't think about it on a daily basis. I just make what I make. Some people have production lines, and I feel like that marries them. They're the line that they have more than me. At some point in my career, I guess my son was young, my mom was sick, and the two ends of the spectrum pulling me in different places. At that point, I was switching my body of work. When I was in college and I started working with plastics, the world conversation was not about global warming, and my materials started causing me a lot of anxiety. Like, what am I doing? And I got pregnant, and then it was like, I'm working with plastics and pregnant, so anyway, so I spent a bunch of years just like figuring out what I wanted to do next to switch my body of work. I married this body of work and these materials at one point in my 20s. And then that marriage didn't work anymore. And I needed to divorce it and move on to who I had grown into. And then it took me a little while to figure out, what did I even want to say? What did I want my work to be? So there was that. But when I was in school, CAD was just starting, the computer aspect of things was starting. 3D printing was just starting, but it wasn't a thing really. And now, I totally am not against any of that. Like, more power to you if that's the route you choose. But I decided at some point in my journey that I wanted to make something that was handmade. And I kind of came to the conclusion on my own that meant I needed to make something that could not be made in another way. It had to only be something like, I didn't want to make something I could be replaced, oh, it's handmade. That's cool. But you could have 3D printed this. So the work that I developed and the technique that I chose, like, why did I choose this like ancient technique? Why? Of all the techniques in the world, why would you choose something
why would you make life so hard on yourself?
Right. Why? And part of it is because I made the conscious decision to do something that could only be made this way. And it's been made this way since the Egyptians. This is the only way that it can be done. Nice. Now, there are other ways of cutting glass. You can laser cut glass, you can water jet cut glass, but you cannot do the undercuts that at this moment, maybe in the future you can, or even the way I finish it, polishing and not polishing, and all of those decisions that go into the aspect of making my work. When I reinvented myself, I sat down and made these conscious choices to make something that was intentionally handmade and organic. And because I so wrapped up in working with plastic and what I was ingesting and around me and all of this stuff, that my themes would be about the environment, sometimes more subtle than others. I was a little worried about, my lefty views, and then doing shows in red territories and people not wanting to buy my work because I'm.
But they like shiny. you know?
They like shiny. Oh, you're wearing a melting iceberg.
Yeah. I mean, I've
they don't even realize it, that they look at it as something pretty. I don't talk about it, but the thought behind a lot of my work, if not all of my work, is environmental.
And it's also, there's a beauty to it too. So you don't have to really go to it, embrace it.
Right.
You don't have to tell them the story about it and be like, I don't know. I feel like I'd like to believe that people aren't just like, yeah, fuck the environment, but they are, but if they're carrying that piece home with them, sometimes you can be a little bit of a subversive. You're like, you don't even know you're carrying that on you, but that's, you got a little melting iceberg on you. That's fine.
Yep. Exactly. You just left with acid rain.
Acid rain.
I'm with that.
But they might never notice.
No, I'm careful. I'm very careful with the names I give things. So the name that I give it to myself and the name that I give the piece, on the application maybe aren't the same. I'm always a little afraid to get too political. I know that's stupid because it shouldn't be political. I mean, but it is. Everything's political nowadays.
Yeah. I did a portrait of a cowboy on, it's like a cowboy. There's some longhorns in the background, but I did it on a Native American territories map in the background too. And I called it Immigrant. And it was like, and the person that bought it was just like, I like the cowboy. I'm like, okay, well, buy the cowboy then. You don't have to necessarily, I can be subversive later and be like, well, what's the name of this? And they're like, he called it Immigrant. We're like, that's fine. Who cares really, right? If they want the pretty picture of the cowboy, then let them think it's a pretty picture of a cowboy. That doesn't really make any difference.
It works for me.
Yeah, right? Let's take it to another place here. You are at a certain level with art shows. We don't necessarily know what our season is going to be, but I feel like you and I are kind of at the same point in our career where it's like, well, we can reasonably accept to put together a good season. We know we're going to get into some shows and put things together, but where do you want to take this next? Are you happy doing art shows, or where do you want to take it?
During the pandemic, and I heard a lot of other artists talk about the same thing, it became obvious that I was on a hamster wheel of shows, and I definitely do not want to go back to that.
Right.
It affected my life, not just career-wise, but like being on that constant hamster wheel. I realized after spending a year and a half with my family, it affected my relationships. It affected my relationship with my son. It affected my relationship in my marriage. Like my marriage was on the brink, really, really on the brink right before shutdown, which made being quarantined in a small house really interesting for a really long time.
There's a reality show.
There is a reality show there. But I feel like if you live through that and you don't grow or learn, then there is something wrong with you. In what direction you grow and what direction you learn, that's not for me to decide for other people. But if you can't not change, like you can't stay in the same space mentally after learning about yourself in a different situation. I don't know. I'm being cryptic, but
no, you're good.
One thing that I realized is that there's a giant world outside of our craft show bubble, Yeah. And for the last 25 years, that was my focus. Make work, sell work. Make work, apply, make work, travel, make work, sell work. And it was like this hamster wheel of, I didn't get into that show. I got into this show. I didn't get into, like make new work, photograph it. Like it was the constant. I mean, everyone who listens to this, I'm sure understands that cycle of like getting in, not getting in, traveling, making. It's like constant. So during the shutdown, they're like still in time, looking on social media and seeing what is going on in other parts of the world. Like what, especially in terms of jewelry, because that's what I make. I started to realize that there were other platforms to sell my work, and not just sell my work, but to interact and be part of a different global community.
Okay.
So I talked to my friend Ayala Natali, who is another jeweler, another art jeweler,
amazing jeweler.
All the time. She's a close friend. And we would have these conversations, and on Instagram, you can like send a post to somebody, that little airplane thing. So we would see things and be like, oh my God, isn't that cool? And then there was a jewelry show in Munich, Germany. Munich had a jewelry week and they did it all online last year. So we were able to really see what was going on in Munich. And we were like, oh my God, it was like blowing my mind. Not only what was happening jewelry wise, but how they were displaying it, how people were representing themselves. And so we were like, that is so cool. That is so much fun. Like, let's get in on this. Let's see what we can do. And so we started a thing that we were like, had no idea where we were going with it, what we were doing. There really was no goal in mind. There's still now there's more of a goal. So we were like, came up with a name and we made a website and we were like, let's see if we could just like put together global calls for entry and put together international jewelry show. We'll do it online. We'll see where it goes. And so we just on a lark, we did it. And we got like hundreds of entries from all over the world. We got like, I think it was like the first one, we got 22 countries. We got like over 200 applications from 22 countries of like really good work. We were like, holy crap, like that's so cool. So in the middle of it, we were like, you know what? We should like publish a book. We should self-publish a book. Let's do a catalog. And so we did. We did the website. And then while we were in the middle of doing it, we realized that Ayala lives in New York. So we were like, let's be a New York gallery.
Right.
And there's a design festival in New York called New York by Design. We were like, well, let's apply and see. Maybe we could host this exhibition on New York by Design. And they accepted it.
No way. That's amazing. Yeah.
And it was like, it just kind of all happened organically. We were just like, I know it was really...
Well, you had time to try. You had time to try to do something else, You had time.
We had the time and it was like, you know what? There's such a big world outside of just the craft show world. And it's kind of funny that like our world is so small in the craft show world. I mean, I hope I'm not like talking bigger than my britches, but like, you get to a certain level of doing this. It's a challenge to get into the good shows, and then it's an even bigger challenge to stay in the good shows. So I'm not saying that that's totally not challenging, because it completely is.
Oh, it's incredibly challenging. I get, you're not saying that. I mean, I just, I feel like with art shows, we just look through the world through a little pinhole camera. Or like even sometimes just through your phone screen. And you're just kind of, I don't know, the wider world is big. Is that show coming up, or is that? Well,
so that show, so it's called Adorn Axis. That's ADORN-AXIS is our website. And on Instagram. And we flew under the radar. We didn't want to take ownership of it ourselves for a while, only because we weren't sure where we were going with it. Honestly, it was like, we were just kind of doing it on a lark, like, let's have fun with this. But we made all these connections overseas and it became like really fun.
Really cool.
Yeah. And we made some connections, like literally like all over the world. So now we just did another call for entry that just ended and we juried it and we're putting that together. And that one is just going to be an exhibition on the website. But while we were doing that, we should have held off the timing. We didn't know. Then
no one
New
knows.
York.
How could you know anything?
Well, we don't know anything and we're flying by the seat of our pants. We kind of have no idea what we're doing, but we're doing it. And that's part of like the excitement of it, is like we kind of are navigating it as we're doing it. So now we're going to do New York Jewelry Week. We're going to host an in-person
amazing
and an online event in New York for New York Jewelry Week. So like
very cool.
we have that call for entry out. And so that's what I'm doing. I mean, I don't know financially if that matters, if it's going to end up in something, but it's kind of like this podcast. Like we're doing it because it's just a way to connect and be part of like something bigger,
Right. Yeah. It makes me crazy. We've all talked about that in some aspect, whether we actually say the hamster wheel or not, but it's like you get on that track. I've talked about it being like a train, and it's like you're never sure where you're going to stop on the train, and it's really hard to get off. And so when everything derailed last year, it makes me a little crazy because like this September, like, oh, I'm not going to do as many shows. I'm not going to do as many. I'm like, now my entire goddamn year is put together into September. And it's like, well, I'm hitting it. Like there's 4 in a row. I don't know if I can do all of them. I mean, my job is not to do craft shows. My job is to be an artist. And how do I sell it as craft shows and other outlets? But it's like, if I sell out at the first show on Labor Day weekend, more power to me. Sorry, I'll cancel the rest of them. It's really not that, it's great. I don't have to do all the travel. I don't have to put that on my kids. It's hard on them, staying with their grandparents and not seeing their folks. And it's tough on everybody, me not seeing them. It's just...
Honestly, I have no answers. I'm kind of flying by the seat of my pants 90% of the time.
Always.
But ideally, we would love to build another platform to sell our work, however that is. That would be a great goal. We would love to do that. I don't know if that'll happen or if it won't happen. I mean, one thing that I personally learned through this whole shutdown pandemic is that all of my eggs were essentially in the show basket. Even though I do sell in galleries and I sell online and I have my website, how did people find my website? They found my website at shows. Like everything was kind of tied into the shows. One of the things that I feel really strongly about for the future is I'm not saying I don't want the basket of the shows at all. I just can't have all of my eggs in that basket all the time, because then when the bottom fell out of that, and that could happen again, I just don't want to live through that again,
Right.
So opportunities just kept coming up. It was like we had the idea and then like New York by Design happened, and then it was just like things kept popping up. It was like, okay, well, this is a sign that we need to just keep on moving forward. And
well, with anything that we do, we're just throwing things up against the wall to see what sticks. It's like, and so you're just trying. And so, I mean, what I'm hearing from you is that you're like, okay, I am trying these outlets, but it might develop into something else. So I'm open to it. You're doing a live jewelry show.
I'm open to it. I spent most of the pandemic time, like, teaching myself how to do like some video animation and make videos. And I know there are people who like doing social media. I'm not a super fan of putting myself out there on social media. And honestly, I hate hearing my own voice. So you'll never see, or you will very rarely see a video where I put myself speaking.
Welcome to the podcast.
I know, but you have like a very soothing, like NPR voice. And I have a very like New Jersey whiny nasal voice. So there's a difference.
I don't know.
I hear my voice and I'm like,
So you're not going to be listening to your own show, I guess.
No, probably not. Like I did like a IG live with the Society of North American Goldsmiths, and I like tried to watch it a couple times, and it gave me such anxiety to hear my own voice that I like, all right, that's that. Like,
right. Yeah. No, I've been there. I did that at the beginning too. I'm like, who the hell is this? It's tough.
I hate me. And I shut it off.
That's the theme of our show. I hate me with Deb and Will.
That's okay. I won't look.
Yeah. All right. No, it's I love that. Like keeping everything open is good, but I love hearing about the New York shows and starting your own. Why the hell not? It's I don't know. It's a new world, and we're getting ready to jump back on that hamster wheel in September. And I know I'll see you out on the road, but it's I don't know. I'm already feeling like I'm looking at that schedule, and I'm like, I'm already.
I know. I have the same thing, and the funny thing is, like, I was just saying to somebody the other day, like, 2 years ago, I would do like 10 shows in a row and not bat an eye. Now I'm like, right before Ann Arbor, I was like, oh my God, like I have to do a show. Like I have to drive to the show, and then I have to like take it out of my car, and I have to like set it up. And there was a point in Ann Arbor where I got my tent out of the car and I laid the pipes down, and I was like, I can walk away from you.
Yeah.
And not even put it back in the car. Like, I don't even care that there's $1,000 on the ground. I don't care.
I'll be honest with you. There's a point in every show where Susan and I talk about that. Like, let's just, let's just go. Let's just leave it. I don't know. Especially, I don't know. If it's raining, it's pouring down rain. It's just pissing down rain. And you're standing there and your feet are wet and you're cold and And it's a tough job to do what we do. And I love it. There are aspects of it that I've just been dying to get back to it. But man, it is really hard.
There's tons of aspects of it that I love. And honestly, like, I miss interacting with not only my friends, but people. I feel like that's an aspect. I don't know if 2D people have the same thing, but a lot of what keeps my work moving is the feedback from people.
Right.
So a lot of that comes from the feedback I get during the show. And without that feedback, I was a little lost, for a little while.
Yeah, you get lost. I need people to tell me like those interactions and I'm like, hey, what about this direction? And I went weird on a couple of pieces and one of them didn't work. And, I've shown it. I mean, like I say it didn't work. Where have I shown it? I showed it in Gasparilla in 2020 at the very beginning. And then I hung it. I think I've shown it twice. Like, nope, doesn't work. Didn't sell.
I don't even bring those to the show. Like, yeah. I did a couple experimental things where like I made work, using other people's work as inspiration. And like, it was just something to get me like a
connected.
I don't know, it was, like an art school assignment. Like,
right.
I don't know. I needed to like give myself that assignment to like get my thoughts moving again.
Yeah.
But they were terrible. They were terrible pieces, and I will not ever sell them.
But if you put them
I will never
out there,
show
you
it to
never
anyone.
know. Yeah,
maybe. You know what? There's always somebody who likes something, but I would not put them out because I hate them.
I find if like an artist comes along and be like, "Ooh, I really like that," and you're like, "Oh God, that's never gonna sell." Like it's like if artists really connected with it, it's like, oh man, that's it's a weird one. That's not going.
It's so funny that you say that because whenever I have a piece that all the artists likes, I know I'm never going to sell it.
Yeah, that's the thing. Like I maybe it's just something that speaks to us. It's a little weirder. It's a little bit like I don't know. It's edgier, but like if an artist isn't buying it, that's.
Well, and there's also like if I make a piece and it's the one that I like the least, that's the first one that'll sell.
Yeah.
And somebody was like, well, is it because you underprice it? I don't think so. It's just the karma of that piece. It's like unloved. And so somebody needs to love it. Like,
well, there's an energy that happens, right? Isn't there like I'll have a piece for like a year and nobody's interested in it. And all of a sudden somebody else like walks in and they're about to buy it. And then they leave. And then it's the next piece that sells to somebody else. It's like,
isn't it funny how you'll have a piece, nobody will look at it. You'll have it forever.
Yeah.
And then in one show, it's like everybody who comes in the booth will talk about that one piece.
Right.
And that's, it's like there's the theory that things take a while for people to like warm up to, but how is that? How can that possibly be? Because though I've had it for a year, it's not been at this show. You know, it's like, it takes a while for its karma to build up. I don't know.
I don't know, but like there will be a whole line that Susan will do, like a whole new line of work. And she'll be like, well, I showed it this year and now it's not, it didn't go. I talked to people about it, but it didn't sell. And then the following year, people will come back and be like, hey, do you have that piece? And you're like, oh, I don't even have that collection out because I thought it sucked. And so you'll put it back away and you're like, okay, well, maybe I'll put it out. And then she starts selling it. It's like it takes a year. I don't know why. It's like something new, something.
I have this old body that was actually one of the first bodies of work I made with the glass. And it was super labor intensive. It was very, very finished, very, very polished. And it was one of the first series that I did. And I did not sell any of them. And then my work evolved and evolved and evolved and evolved. And I unearthed it. And I was like, I like these pieces. I swear to God, it was like when I brought those pieces back out, I sold all of them right away.
That's so weird.
Why?
Yeah. Why?
So weird.
I don't know.
Why?
It's a new energy. You gotta put it out there.
Nobody wanted them 6 years ago.
Right.
Nobody wanted them.
You were ahead of the curve.
These pieces are kind of, I don't question it, but.
You just love it when it happens and move on.
I'll take it.
Yeah.
Yeah, but if I was to remake something similar, I'd probably sit on it for another 6 years.
Exactly. Thanks for joining us here. And I do think I would have been run out of town on a rail if I hadn't gotten a jeweler in here. But there's so many, like I'm married to a jeweler. She wouldn't talk to me.
Yeah, we're all used to being ignored. I don't even like, I don't know. I wouldn't have been a part of it because we're usually not represented. We're like the stepchild.
But that's just because we don't get to know a lot of jewelers, I think. You're completely locked into your booth.
No, we're in
at
our
the end of the day, you zip up and you shut down and you wheel it away in a suitcase.
My family jewel.
Your family jewels. You got to keep them locked away safe. Keep them under lock and key.
Well, so good to talk to you. I miss you. I miss friends.
I know. Well, we'll see you on the road. We'll be out there.
I've been very hermity.
We all have. It's got to, rub the scales away from your eyes, and we'll get back out there on the road.
Yeah.
Well, good luck out there. Yeah, great talking to you too. Thank you so much for doing this.
You guys say hi to Susan.
I will. She says hi too. We'll talk to you soon.
Hi. Okay. All right. Bye.
Thanks, Deb. Bye.
That was fun. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed hearing about all of Deb's experiences. Thanks, Will. Thanks for talking to her.
Well, thank you for whittling our 2.5-hour talk down to a more manageable listening time. At least Oscar will be not complaining too bad. I was kind of tempted to just give it the whole thing just so that we could hear him online complaining about how long the podcast was.
Yeah, there was you guys were just having a good old long friendly chat. It was good.
That's what we try to do with this thing. Well, I appreciate you cutting it down to a more manageable size anyway. Hey, what do you have going on next week?
I got my interview logged this week for the end of the month with Eric Lee.
Oh, awesome. Another one of my favorites.
He's a great guy. I learned so much from him. What you and I had kind of discussed when we were talking about our guests coming up here is we like the fact that Eric has a very big presence and his work has a appeal to the high-end corporate and a high-end client. And he really gives some great advice on how to harness those kinds of collectors.
Okay, cool. Well, I always feel like I'm brain picking whenever I talk to him. He's done almost everything in this industry. I feel like he's been at every single show. He's been around the block and he's just a cool guy. So I'm looking forward to that talk.
Totally awesome. Before we sign off here for today, I want to send a thank you out to Lisa Ramos. She contributed this week to the podcast. Thank you so much. And we appreciate you adding our link to your blog and talking about us online.
Yeah, I appreciate those kind words. Anytime somebody spreads the kind of info that she did on her site, it kind of gives you a charge. And I appreciate you forwarding that to me at the end of a very, very long day to read. It was a nice little pick-me-up.
Yeah, she had a really nice message for us. So we really appreciate your support. If anyone else would like to contribute to the podcast, you can do so by clicking on the episode notes here on our PayPal link or send us a Venmo contribution at Independent Artist Podcast.
Or if you see Douglas at an upcoming art show, just pin a $100 bill to his shirt with a safety pin. He'll walk around. He'll proudly wear that for the rest of the show.
That's right. All right, guys. Well, thanks for listening this week. And we'll see you in October.
I'll see you in October, my friend. Good luck this month. I'm rooting for you, rooting for us all.
All right. Bye.
This podcast is brought to you by the National Association of Independent Artists. The website is naiaartists.org.
Also sponsored by Zapplication. That's zapplication.org. And while you're at it, check out Will's website at willarmstrongart.com and my website at sigworthglass.com.
Be sure to subscribe to this podcast to be notified when we release new episodes.